I love half-hearted applause. I know it's not for me, but because then it would just be like, calm down, it's just me. But man, I find it just funny when there's someone's like, yeah. And you probably feel a little shame, like I wasn't reading the room right. It's all right. No, I just want to uncomfortably shout out that I love that, man. It's so good. All right. I am hopped up on Sudafed and Motrin. So I'm ready to go. And apparently into the mic, don't clap. Sorry, Greg. Our sound guy is also named Greg. I wasn't just talking to myself. That's not to say I don't do that. I am regularly, Greg, calm down. That's one of my favorite. It's not my favorite, but it is the most regular that says, Greg, they weren't after you. It's all right. So I'm like the gentle voice of my wife. So anyway, man, we're doing this forgiven or forgiving, however we're going to end that verb there, challenge that we're trying to get a hold of the fact that God's intent is forgiveness for you. And the end result of that, ideally, is freedom. Yeah. That being released from the weight of choices and so many other things that separate us, God says, no, we're not separated anymore. It's one of the cool things about even that, to jump back even a month, or almost a month, to the Christmas idea when the angels show up and they say, goodwill, peace on earth. There is a cessation of fighting. There's an end to the war that as people we declared. And that's a whole other thing. I just leave that. Think about it if you're curious. Talk to me, because I just think it's cool and how that works. So today, last week, Pastor Raphael talked about sin. That was fun. Right? We're in this, the word that the author is using in our book is scars, and he's using each letter to represent something, and S was sin, and so that was feel good, I think. Today we're going to cover confession. Yeah, thank you. Right? I think it'll be okay. It's a weird thing to write about because, well, let me go it this way. Who, with me, are either are Catholic or ex-Catholics? You've been in the right? There's a bunch. Good. I love you guys. Lutherans are somewhere in there too, but give me Catholics. All right? The reason is I feel like I understand you because I was Catholic. I grew up in a home for about 10 years in that environment and being Catholic. And I've never, in my course of being a pastor in Assemblies of God churches, I've never had a Catholic come up and say, and do anything really that tries to subvert leadership. Right? It just went quiet. You're like, people do that? Not all of you. I asked this one of my first sermons. Have you met people? It doesn't mean that Catholics are perfect. We're so not. But there's something about having a church festival where there's a beer tent that just gives you a less intense, things are going to work out somehow. And if they don't, we all die. That's my read on my Catholicism, and some of you might be with it, me. The downside is there sometimes lacks some intensity, but so the question for me was, how do I talk about confession with non-Catholics? And then how do I get past Catholics to value confession, right? Because for some reason you're delivered from all of that. And baby in bathwater kind of thing. We're trying not to throw out the things that are valuable and maybe keep some stuff. So like I said, I grew up in a home, the home I grew up in for about 10 years. They're very good Catholics. I mean, whatever you imagine really good Catholics are, they were that. And then whatever you imagine really good versions of our Christianity are, they were that too. I was allowed to watch Smurfs. On the other hand, I couldn't watch rated R movies. So I don't know where they got that, but, if you're not aware, our version, not denomination, but this evangelical kind of thing in the past has been a little uptight and maybe gone too far in its fear of everything. But not carbs, I can say that. Right? Lust. Ooh, horrible. Gluttony, bring it. It was a weird thing, I think. But anyway, I went through my first communion when I was about 7. That's when I moved into the home, and again, great people, which I think, if I remember right, involved first confession, because I can't imagine taking communion without first confessing. And so that was my first kind of thing. So I moved from, I think I've said before, I think when I was born, my family was Lutheran. At some point, we were going to Methodist church. Before I moved into this Catholic home, I had been going to a Baptist church. So I remember getting baptized. I don't remember as a baby getting baptized. I got baptized Baptist, and then I got baptized Catholic, and I grew up we lived in Utah for a while, and so maybe someone baptized for me there. I feel really good, like clean. So I've been through the sacraments. I've done them pretty well, I think. But for non-Catholics, confession, again, excuse my constant drinking Sudafed. But I went through First Communion, and for non-Catholics, this involved going into what I can only describe as a fancy closet that had a wall in between the other side of the fancy closet where the priest was, and he was in his side of the wardrobe. I don't know what else to. I'm sure there's a church name. I just certainly don't know it. But again, I was young. But what I remember is you'd kneel down. I'm sure there's different types of confessionals, but for the ones I was involved, you'd kneel down and say something pretty close to this: "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been," pick a number of days, 20 days, 30 days, a month since my last confession. Or if you were a lady who went to confession every single day, it's been one day, it's been a few hours since my last confession. And the priest would say something. I don't know what they say. I'm not a priest, so I don't know. And then you'd list off your sins. This, even looking back, was weird. But it's what we did. It's what you did and what I was shown to do. And as a kid, I do remember this, where we would talk to each other about what we were going to say before we went in. And it really wasn't that we were scheming, Carissa. We weren't even close to that. It's just that you can't get into the confessional and be like, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," because you know that. You got that locked, right? It's been 3 days since my last confession or whatever it is. And then you go, no, you got to have something, right? Priest hasn't got all day. They got things to do. I don't know what. I don't know what priests do, but I'm assuming it's priestly. And so we would talk, and you kind of figure out what you're going to say, and you tried to change it up as if they were remembering what you said last time, 30 days ago, or whatever it was. And movies make this confession seem like it's a counseling session. I don't know about, again, you other Catholics, but it was never even close to that for me, anyway. It was more like visiting a really negative mall Santa. Bib and Bob, I feel like, yeah, I don't know what it was for you. Maybe you just had compassionate German priests. That seems like an oxymoron, but I don't know. But for me, yeah, it wasn't. And they were never, at least my experience, they was never mean, but it also wasn't, we're going to hang out here and you're going to help me figure out life together. It was, get it done. And so we'd say something like, I was mad at my brother, I cussed, or something like that. Then they would give you penance, which was go out and pray 3 Hail Marys and 4 Our Fathers, and then you would go do that. You'd kneel down in a pew. You would run through these things. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, the kingdom come, that will be done. And so you're able to nail this, right? And you get it done. Try doing, you want to learn how to do that, do the rosary, because that's a whole different thing. But you get good at it, and you run through it, and so now I've paid my price, apparently, for my sin, but I wasn't really thinking about that at 10. And so that is when I say confession, at least for Catholics. Maybe there's hints of that. And for non-Catholics, it's, I know what that word is. I think that would be what it is because we don't really address this. I think the other weird side of this, without joking, is that this word is also wrapped up in certain types of theology, which I'm not trying to rip on. I'm just describing, although I don't have a hugely positive version of this, so hopefully it doesn't sound too negative, but it is that this is part of the formula for forgiveness. I really dislike that idea. And so how do we take confession and understand that it is a thing, that it's serious, but it also doesn't have to be a weight around your neck pulling you down. That it is the opportunity to engage God about things that you become aware that are creating rifts in between you and He. Right? And so try to talk about confession. And it's a real challenge, like I said. Among the challenges is we really don't like to think we're wrong. Like if I say, are you a sinner? Your correct answer is, your true answer is, yeah, but to a point. Because, that's old covenant, bro, or whatever your end word is. That's old covenant, we're under the new covenant, so I was a sinner and now I'm not. Can I ask you where you think the new covenant came from? Maybe the old? It didn't wipe it out. It didn't, they didn't pick it up and go old and new. Well, we don't need that old stuff. Right? It's not a water heater. Like you get a new water heater and now you can throw away the old manual or whatever it is. It's not that. It's not an old car that you get rid of the thing because you realize you're not going to buy that 64 Mustang and you need to fix it up. It's not that. The entire new is built on the foundation of the old. And the new is only well understood. I'm not saying it can't be understood at all. I'm saying the strong understanding comes from a healthy understanding of the Old Testament. This is how it functions, church. Old and new covenant. You're under the new covenant. And why that's important is for the vast majority of us, we're not Hebrew. And so you and I are beneficiaries who need to learn about the things that have come before. Yes? So confession also involves sin. Not so much trying to do it, but it's fact. And sin is also tough, as Pastor Raphael talked about. I find, as we're dealing with confession or thinking about confession, that for us, sin is often more sinful when I feel bad. And it's less sin if I don't feel bad. Because as far as I can tell, the logic seems to go, if I don't feel bad, it can't be bad. Add to this the fact that we tend to compare ourselves to each other. And maybe it's, look at that train wreck. At least I'm not them. God can't be unhappy with me and be okay with them. It can't be that he actually knows you personally. And that there's a different relationship he has with you than everybody else. Pastor Greg, you're only supposed to use that when you're talking about how he likes to bless me. Really? It's not about the fact that his challenge, his correction is blessing? Man, that preacher can preach. That's good stuff. And we're in a fun time with words and language where we also don't think we should be shamed. Look, I've been to Walmart. A little shame is valuable, y'all. You shouldn't wear that here. Maybe you and your entire extended family shouldn't be walking down the same aisle together. Someone good. My pet peeve, I don't know if I've said, is when they're in an aisle, or anyone is in an aisle, and they're so lack self-awareness that they have a cart, and instead of just kind of seeing, and then they can look, they actually end up turning the cart so the whole aisle is full, and then I'm just like, I'm a pastor, so I'm supposed to be nice. So I'll talk about them when they don't know, because I don't know them. Right? And so I wait, because I'm kind and demure, and, that's the most fun word right now, I think, demure. I can't say it seriously, so it's always being said ironic. But anyway, but if we don't feel bad and we're okay compared to others and shame is now sinful, what do we do? It's probably not confession. So honest, it makes it tough to stand here and say and try to write, oh my gosh, that we need to confess, even though Proverbs 28:13 is great. It says, people who conceal their sins will not prosper, but if they confess and turn from them, they will receive mercy. So in preparing for this, guys, there's so much in the Bible. There's no way. The best I can do, honestly, is hit on what I think is the heart of confess. Because there's just so much in the Bible. It begins in Leviticus, which don't throw away. Don't, again, rip that part out. It's hard, I get that, but there's ideas there. Do you know that the New Testament is not the first time that God talked about forgiveness? Seriously, a lot in the Old Testament. And it's almost always connected to, if you will come and confess, I will forgive. And this is what it's in this Leviticus. And then you can bring it up to David and some of his Psalms, which are, God, I've turned away from you. I look around my life and I know you love me and I am choosing and I know I'm being faithful to you. But looking at my life, I just know that there's something I'm off. And then you get ones where he's like, I'm utterly certain this is what I did without question. Please forgive me. Even to the point, restore unto me the joy of my salvation. And you bring this up and we get into the New Testament where there's a number of references, and then kind of a big one is James saying, confess your sins to each other. And I think we'll hit on this in the podcast, so I won't go deep. But he's trying to say, look, make sure as you're praying, because he's talking about praying and praying for healing. And he says, make sure in that situation that you're being accountable to each other so that your prayers are unhindered. So in prepping for this, I've come to the conclusion that we need probably a ton of things, but I think this is a good summary. Number one, and they're really interrelated, but honesty and 2 parts humility. And the first part of humility, I think, begins with God awareness. And the second part of humility for today is self-awareness. So how about honesty? And in this, what is confession? And Confession is this. It's really, really simple. It's just being honest. It's being honest. And guys, as we're dealing with all the complexity, I kind of made fun of our views of sin and shame and things like that. But in your honesty, do you know that you can even say something like this to God? That, Father, I know that this is a thing, and I don't want it, but I also am struggling coming to you because I'm embarrassed of it, and I'm confused about how to deal with shame, and that, man, I don't know how to stop, even as I'm preaching to you, because I could go on and on. What a conversation to have with God. And you find that what on the negative we might call word vomit, right, becomes whatever you want to call it, but a flowing of words out to God that isn't complaining about somebody, but instead confessing and admitting where I'm at, where I'm happy, where I'm struggling, where I'm sad, where I'm broken, where I've broken faith. Right? It's simple honesty and maybe even brutal honesty, but it's telling the truth. This definition isn't deep. It's not difficult, but oh my gosh, could it be hard? See, it's honest of me, as I make fun of this, to admit to you, I think vegetables that crunch are gross. I do. I know. You didn't know something mildly humorous was going to come, so I'll state it again. I think, and this is true, I think vegetables that crunch are gross. I don't need you to be with me on that. I just know I'm right. We're going to break the snap peas together. Bib, man, that would just bring Bib joy and everything else. And I'd be like, I am so happy she would be happy. Please don't make me look at them. Just a side note, because it occurred to me today, is some of you are like, oh, I just love Brussels sprouts. Really? You're like, yeah, have you ever had them with bacon? Oh, you love bacon. But see, it's honest to me, and it really is, to say that I think that, but who cares? It's completely different for me to confess to him maybe, God, they say you do miracles, but I don't see them and I'm struggling. It's harder to admit, God, I think one of the reasons I'm struggling is because I'm not open to change. God, when I was a young Christian, I heard that I basically took away that I'm never supposed to feel bad, and then once I prayed, then I'm always good. I don't want to argue against your theology here, guys. I'm not worried about it. I don't need to. But is that how the rest of your relationships work? So honesty, it's just utterly necessary. It's hard. But being hard doesn't make it wrong. Being hard may be one of the signs that it's valuable. Again, that's not 100%, but in this case. So honesty. And next, humility, that first one that I mentioned, God awareness. I wanted to split this up because I was thinking about humility. One of the things I do want to talk about is self-awareness. But in our culture where we have it flipped, where my self-awareness affects my God awareness. And I'll figure out how much God I need. And a bunch of different versions of this, yeah? And I think that this God awareness is the principal thing. And I only put honesty in front of it is I don't think we can do the God awareness without just a commitment to, you know what, I'm going to try and be true. And so here's the thing, church, he is first. And we say this a lot, and we sing about it, and I know, but there's no, if I say God is God, he's so great, and for some reason none of the lyrics are popping in my head, but all of them, do you think God is like, thank you, I forgot? Right? Do you think he becomes more God? Like, you remember that Peter Pan story where it's like, oh, if you clap or whatever it is, Tinkerbell comes back to life. Do you think our fantasy made up elf God becomes something more because you and I affirm him. Or maybe he's real apart from us, and the reason you and I are real is because he is. I'm going to go with the thing I'm saying, even though I'm saying it sarcastically. And we got in the beginning God, Genesis 1:1. You know that's the first 4 words in English. In the beginning God. And it goes on with this verb, created. That's awesome. I get it. But something about those first 4. I'm just like, yeah, in the beginning God. 10 Commandments, the first one, no other gods. No other gods. I'll say this again and again. I might have, again, said it already in past sermons, but you ever realize that there's only one group of animals or beings on the planet that need the 10 Commandments? Right? Hey, by the way, your first rule, I'm God, you're not. Really? Are you sure? Right? I mean, think about that. Hey, don't steal. You mean don't steal anything? What if they don't want it? And I just don't want to talk to them? No, just don't steal. It's going to break community. Okay. But I can dig their wife, right? No, don't do that. The 10 Commandments are fascinating and unbelievably simple. No other gods is the first one. John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. And we go, oh, Jesus, good. Yeah, but he's with God, and he was God, is God. This God awareness is utterly important. So why confession? Why does this affect confession? And bluntly, it's because I need to humble myself. My friend Josh is what I can, as far as I can tell, a good guitar player. Right? But here's the thing. I know very few good guitar players, so I don't think he should take my word for it. For Josh to get better at a thing is, I'm betting, and you can agree, I don't have this in my notes, but and because you're just comfortable with me talking to you in front of 700 people, is that if you had something, you wouldn't just go to someone who you know is better and say, guitar, teach me. They'd be like, I don't. You would actually show that you have some clue in which you'd be like, there's this rhythm I can't quite get. I can hear it, but I can't hear it. I don't know, and can you show me the strum pattern? Or how did that come from? I can do everything you're doing, but there's something else. How are you thinking about this? Am I correct? And what that would involve is him going, I don't know everything. I'm going to go to somebody who knows the answer, or at least can bring me closer to where I want to go, where I need to go. The requirement is humility. There is I need, but also, or I want, but also I can't. Yeah? That statement doesn't mean you lack value. We're not talking about, does God love you? Does God value you? I'm not sure what else God can do to express his value. When at the pinnacle of creation, he said, let's make dirt beings. That's what Adam means, by the way, is dirt man. Let's make things that are like us. And let's give them a job that is like our job. We're going to put them in charge of everything. Now, looking back, we should go, oh, no. Have you met us? And he's like, not yet. But we need to humble ourselves. We need this God awareness. Him first, always, and in everything. James 4:6, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Ironically, listen, this is important for some of us here. This is all super good. So anyway, but this is good. Ironically, humility is not just needed for confession or things that are just kind of heavy or weighty. Listen, it's a necessity to even engage God as he blesses. C.S. Lewis, fantastic author. This is a little passage from The Weight of Glory and other addresses, and he wrote, "It would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered to us. Like ignorant child who wants to go on making a mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by an offer of a holiday at the sea, we are far too easily pleased." The idea that God has, that you're like, "God bless me." And he's like, "Are you sure? Because my ideas are way bigger than what you're thinking." "No, God, I want a 2025 car. Bless me." Really? Maybe there's more. Maybe your new car would be a byproduct of the effort you put in and the connection to God, but that's a different sermon. But guys, listen, what if this honesty and the resulting trust that is built and created and maintained between you and God, listen to me, allowed you to dream again? Because instead of, as David said, "My sin has always been before my face," it's not there. Because you've given that sin to him, and now you see him. The humility necessary, though. The humility that when you're being able to say, "God, I trust you. Wait a minute. I want to trust you. No, wait a minute. Seriously, God, I want to trust you. I think I'm scared." This God awareness, followed by self-awareness. I don't know if you've read it, but there's a book by Dale Carnegie is the one I'm going for. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. That book, that title doesn't hit in our culture, but fantastic book, written a number of years ago, like in the 30s and 40s. So, great little story about a guy named Two Gun Crowley. I just want to say that if your nickname is Two Gun, you might have made some decisions in your life that may not be 100% great. But anyway, Carnegie writes, on May 7th, 1931, the most sensational manhunt New York City had ever known had come to its climax. After weeks of search, Two Gun Crowley, the killer, the gunman who didn't smoke or drink, was at bay. Trapped in his sweetheart's apartment on the West End Avenue, 150 policemen and detectives laid siege to his top-floor hideaway. They chopped holes in the roof and they tried to smoke out Crowley, the cop killer, with tear gas. They then mounted their machine guns on surrounding buildings. And for more than an hour, one of New York's fine residential areas reverberated with the crack of pistol fire and the rat-tat-tat of machine guns. Crowley, crouching behind an overstuffed chair, fired incessantly at the police. 10,000 excited people watched the battle. They didn't have TV. Well, they didn't have TV. I mean, this is it. So I'm guessing that'd be all right. Anyway, nothing like it had ever been seen before on the sidewalks of New York. When Crowley was captured, Police Commissioner E.P. Mulrooney, that's a cop name, declared that the two-gun desperado was one of the most dangerous criminals ever encountered in the history of New York. He will kill, said the commissioner, at the drop of a feather. But how did Two-Gun Crowley regard or think of himself? We know because while police were firing into his apartment, he wrote a letter addressed to whom it may concern. And as he wrote, blood flowing from his wounds, leaving a crimson trail on the paper. The letter that Crowley wrote said, "Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one that would do nobody any harm." Important to know is that a short time before this, Crowley had been making out with his girlfriend on a country road in Long Island, and suddenly a policeman walked up to the car and said, "Let me see your license." Without a word, Crowley drew his gun and cut the policeman down with a shower of lead. As the dying officer fell, Crowley leaped out of the car, grabbed the officer's revolver, and fired another bullet into the prostrate body. And that was the killer who said, "Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one that would do nobody any harm." Crowley was sentenced to the electric chair. Confession, guys, requires at least some self-awareness, but we don't like admitting we're wrong. How extreme is it? Apparently, according to other reading that I did, many clear criminals blame something else for whatever they did. This is the big version, right, of the dog ate my homework. Oh, it wasn't you? I didn't eat my homework. You know what I'm saying? Well, we're not responsible for anything, and yet Scripture is covered in the fact that we are. We choose, and we're responsible for our choices. I want you to feel good about that, and I want you to feel weighty about that. Confession requires you to honestly assess yourself in the light of God. Confession puts your stuff in the light. And can I give you just a hint? This doesn't cover everything, but can I let you know that if you find yourself hiding something, it may be one of those things that you need to bring out. All right? A silly version of this that doesn't need to go out is every once in a while. When I was younger, cash was nice because you could go to Taco Bell and no one knew about it. Yeah, that's hidden. I would say it's more of a challenge to my relationship with my wife that I'm like, she'd make me feel bad. But it's a tiny, tiny, silly version of the fact that we think God is so disappointed in us, and so we repeat the Garden of Eden. And upon realizing and accepting and experiencing that we are not right, we run away. And the challenge of confession is to, instead of hiding and covering, we go directly to Him because we trust. We sang, He's not trying to hurt us. We put our stuff in the light, not in the light of others. As a leader and someone who cares, I care about what you're doing and how you're doing it and stuff, and I want you to win or whatever, however you want to put that. But as a person between me and God, and when I'm talking about confession, it's not about you. It's about Him, and then it's about me because He is a standard. And where is He? Where am I? How do I get where He is? I want it in the light of Him. Not in the light of current thoughts and cultural climate. Not in the light, listen, of imagined intentions. Oh, you know what I meant. I know what you meant, but I also know what you did. But see, in this situation, we'll just assume God knows. Often we don't. And the needful prayer is often, God, make me aware of where you are so that I can come to you. Give me a heart that desires after you and pursues after you. In conclusion, how do we do this? In most cases, this is just talking to God. I've given examples. But the focus in this prayer begins with God. It begins with God. If we're coming to confession, it begins with Him. And I would encourage honesty to the point of, God, I want to hide this. I don't want to tell you this. God, this is the same thing I told you yesterday. And I told you I was done. But I trust you. Please. God, I feel bad and I can't stop feeling bad. God, I feel guilty. God, I remember what I used to do. Whatever it is. We have a God who cares. We have a God who's firmly established that you matter. And we have a God who listens. Hebrews 4, verses 14 through 16. So then, since we have a great high priest, Jesus, who has entered heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to what we believe. This high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he faced all the same things we do, yet he did not sin. Listen, so let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God. Your version that you might have heard, let us come boldly to the throne of grace that we may obtain mercy. In this one, it's there we will receive his mercy and we will find grace to help us when we need it most. Church, as I'm talking about confession, last week we talked about sin. I want to do, as we're closing here, a slight adjustment in the question. It's not, I mean, if you're doing wrong, talk to him, confess it. Decide with him and keep going to him. If you're like me when I was a younger Christian, God, you have to be done with me. He's not. God, you have to be tired of me. I don't know why, but he's not. His vision for what can be and will be is so far past what you and I have. The necessity is trust. But let me give you this a little bit of adjustment. Instead of God, search me and find me, do that. God, have I sinned? Yes, do that. But let me add, in light of what you currently know about him, is there anything in your life that you have control of that is hindering your connection to him? Is there anything in your life that is in the way of you obeying him? Maybe even this. For some of you are like, no, I'm on. You're rich young rulering, but is it possible to change the point of view from where I violated a command to, I know you're called to love. Where have I not loved? Where can I love? Who needs a neighbor? Not as guilt, but rather as a prayer to be able to see where the path of Jesus and myself are not the same. Can you stand with me and we'll pray? Our prayer team's going to come forward, and if you would like prayer, I want you to feel free. I encourage it. Come up. Let them pray with you. You pray for whatever it is, especially if you really need to adjust your way of living, and you need to see Jesus be the primary source.